There we go.
Okay, so welcome to the BEwell Hub experience, our weekly get-together on a Tuesday to help each other perform better in life and in business, and yeah, help each other on the journey. Just some ground rules. The ground rule one is we have Daniel today as our speaker, our co-host, and he has the floor. So let's give him some time to actually share some of his experiences. We're talking about strategic thinking, and so he's gonna enlighten us on this topic. Let's try and stay on the topic as much as possible, so we don't all start going off on tangents. If we can, stay mute if possible, so we don't disturb the speaker, and then just put your hand up or put your question in the chat if you've got an insight or a comment. I've put Daniel's contact details in the chat. So if you want to contact him directly after the meeting for any reason, you can contact him directly. You can also put your contact details in the chat, and so we can get in touch with each other. We've got Mohini from New Delhi today, a new participant. So Mohini, you too, you can put your contact details in there, and then should we want to contact you a little bit easier. This meeting is being recorded, okay, and I'll put this on the YouTube channel, so you can go back to it if you want, or you can share it with your contacts or your community. You can do that. Okay, I think that's the ground rules done. So I was saying today we're going to be talking about strategic thinking, enhancing leadership with Daniel Osborne. What are the key highlights? What is coaching for strategic thinking? How to coach a leader on strategic thinking? Some psychometric assessments, maybe we can. These are some of the points, not all the points. Obviously, we're not going to talk about all of these, but some of the points that we can come to. Let me introduce you to Daniel Osborne. Daniel Osborne is the president and founder of Max Potential Coaching, a leadership development coaching firm. As an industrial organizational psychologist and executive coach, Daniel brings a wealth of expertise and passion for coaching leaders in strategic thinking and behavioral change. His work empowers leaders to unlock their full potential and drive meaningful impact within their organizations. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming and sharing your expertise. And perhaps you just give us a few words before we start the meeting on this topic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Gary. And my pal Debbie is in the chat in the audience here, and she's the one who introduced me to the BEwell webinar. So Debbie, I saw your message. Great to see you too. And greetings, everybody. Glad you're all here. So thank you for that introduction, Gary. So strategic thinking in coaching. I really want to spend some time, talking about what it actually is, because there's various areas of coaching. People sometimes get mixed up with things. So focusing on that strategic thinking side is my first love, and that's what brought me to coaching. So it's really, kind of about starting out, what is this? What exactly is it? Because a lot of people think of coaching in the professional workplace, they think about performance, and people hate the word performance coaching because it's always about, how do I do this better? How do I do that better? What's going on here? The strategic thinking side is about crafting a strategic direction. I like to use the term direct decision analysis. What's going to happen if I make certain decisions? And a lot of leaders need an opportunity to talk some of these things out, really think about a different perspective compared to the one that they're stuck in at the current time that you might be meeting with them. They have direct reports. Sometimes they have a board of directors that they answer to. Sometimes they have a Fortune 500 company with 300,000 people working for them. There can be a lot of stress, and leadership can be a lonely place. So when you have that trusted advisor or coach that you can talk these things through, it helps them refresh their own mindset. Think about some other things, because we all get tunnel vision sometimes when we're so focused on a goal. We forget what's going on everywhere around us. We forget about the people around us. As odd as that may sound, but that's what makes our experience. So I'd like to pose a question to all of you, if anyone's interested in answering this. When you think of strategic thinking, in a coaching context, a developmental context, what comes to mind to you? Is there anything that jumps out? And anybody can answer this. Feel free to come off mute.
Go, Debbie, you go for it.
Yeah. I agree with you, Daniel, that strategic thinking is something that is often misunderstood. Strategy is misunderstood. Okay. What comes to mind though for me specifically is it's how you plan to implement a vision. That's what it is for me. You know, it's the steps you take, which are the tactics to implement a vision. So if you're on a mission to change the world, then you have an idea of where you want to go and how you're going to do it. And that for me would be how you do the strategy is how you get there.
That's an excellent answer. Anybody else?
I think there's like strategic thinking is like the compass. So I was saying planning, it's like a compass. It tells you in which direction to go.
Yeah, it really is. Implementing that vision, you know, and when you try to describe a vision, it's very strategic in nature because people are always looking for the action steps, you know, like how many emails do I have to send? How many people do I have to work with? How many units of whatever it is your company provides do you need to sell? They're thinking tactical all the way. And when I have this conversation with leaders, I like to ask them, you know, when you're talking to your staff, do they know where their work comes from? Do they know that the action items that make up a job description come from an overarching strategy that you see in terms of a vision for your company? A lot of the times that puts the brakes on real quick because people are like, oh, I go to work and I do this and I do that. When they have their manager, or if they happen to be in management themselves and they have a more senior leader as their supervisor, they start to have these conversations, start to understand, well, where does it come from? Where is it going? Then you start to get that introduction to strategy. And then with the strategic thinking side that I like to focus on, it's almost always with high-level leaders. Occasionally, you might get a high potential. And for those who may not be familiar with that term, a high potential is simply somebody that shows great promise, shows great abilities. They could maybe move into a senior leadership role one day themselves. And Debbie really hit the nail on the head. How do you implement that vision? How do you achieve this through all the people that work for you? Because you can't do it on your own. You can have a small business, you can do really well, but if you want large scale change, you need a lot of people to do it. So Gary, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about strategic thinking. Are we talking about, is it a future action, Daniel, or is it where is the focus? Is it to something? Is it to building? Like, I mean, because you said before, the employees come into the office, they just go through the work, they do their daily work, they don't know where the work's come from or whether the work's going to continue, but they just go through that routine day by day. So, but when you talk about strategic thinking, are you referring to future plans? What are you referring to?
So it is definitely future plans, but it's also present action. That's why it can be so difficult to wrap your head around. Because how is something about the present and the future at the same time? Because you currently have a company that's doing things. Maybe it sells a product or a service. That came from something. That came from somebody's vision that started that company. And it has grown over time. Whether it was in the direction you intended or not, that's another interesting conversation. But the fact is, something has gone correct for this company to grow. Now you have direct reports who are doing all this tactical work. They're getting a lot of things done. Maybe they're selling the product, making money. How is it a present strategy? Well, it's because the company is doing what it says it's going to do. Its mission and vision statement. You know, we say, like, for example, with Max Potential Coaching, my mission is to provide the highest quality coaching engagement possible. And I achieve this through a vision of having honesty, transparency, and authenticity with everyone I come in contact with. So how do you achieve something and where is it going in the future? So that's why it can be a little difficult. The leader is thinking, this is where we're going, but maybe I want to go in a different direction. What are the implications of that if I decide to make this decision? Going back to decision analysis, that's my favorite word today. And then when you think about, well, if I go in that direction, what kind of shockwave is this going to send throughout the company? Am I going to eventually have to lay off people? Are they going to lose jobs because they became more efficient in something? Am I going to completely rebrand a company and lose all my base customers? Am I going to become something completely different? Am I going to run the stock price into the ground and then nobody wants to invest in the company anymore? Am I going to upset my employees to where they don't want to work for me anymore? So, yes, Gary.
So a question as an entrepreneur myself, I'm on the other side actually. I don't do enough of this strategic thinking because sometimes there's a need to move quickly, and you have to move quickly, especially in the small business. If you're in a franchising or a big corporate, obviously it takes a little bit longer. I tend not to overthink too much. My question to the audience here, maybe to Marie as well, how does strategic thinking work for you in your decision making? Whether it's with business or with life or whatever, how much strategic thinking do you do before you take action?
Well, I've been trying to do better at that and be better at that. And so just for me, I believe part of my strategic thinking was to finally get to a place where I would specifically target a certain audience. And so I started targeting the women in midlife who are in burnout, right? So but that also, it did bring up these thoughts about, okay, are all the people on my not real big mailing list right now going to all drop off and I'm going to have no mailing list? You know what I mean? and so in my head, I'm thinking, is this, even though it's strategic and it's a step in a direction that I'm really, from coaches and others, trying to kind of like focus and be strategic, there was this little side of me, this little person talking in my head saying, well, now you're going to lose everything, right? Because you're now focusing over here, and now the people that you have aren't going to be interested. So that comes up in my strategic thinking, and I don't know if that's probably some limiting beliefs on my part, but I would think that everybody would have that. You have that coming up, and you have to look at it. Is it worth that to take this direction over here, knowing that you might lose something over here? That's part of losing your employee base or in a bigger company or whatever. I think that's still the same kind of thoughts. It's just smaller scale for somebody like myself.
That's an excellent point. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the strategic thinking side, I was talking about it in a business context because of my profession, but we do it all the time in our own personal life. You know, if you decide to move to a new country, Gary, I know you shared your experience about moving to Italy from England, right?
Yeah.
That
Well,
was, I can imagine the stress that brought you, thinking about what can and will, and do I not know what's going to happen when I do this?
but I think I was much worse. Let's say, it was in the past, where I actually just jumped into this without speaking the language, knowing the culture, not being a businessman or entrepreneur or whatever. Didn't have any of that background, you know, and then just suddenly finding myself sinking or swimming, and somehow swimming and swimming. So I didn't really do a lot of the strategic thinking, and I think it's one of the things that has really been a little bit of, I don't want to say my downfall, but it's something I can really work on, because I tend to sort of go and then adjust as I move.
It's an interesting context, because it goes back to coaching in general. When you go through a coaching session or a coaching engagement with somebody, you're not doing something that you've like never heard of. It's like this new thing that was just released. Oftentimes it's information you've already had, experiences you've already had, thoughts you've already had. It's repackaged differently, and you have a coach helping you through it. But it's easy but difficult at the same time. It's easy to understand, but it's difficult to implement and to actually execute. And back to Marie's point, you're talking about, okay, I'm going to focus on women in midlife. And then you even brought up, well, am I going to lose my mailing list? Am I going to get a new one? Sometimes if you lose the old one, but to get a new one that's perhaps larger, more responsive, however you might define what success is there. I thought that was an excellent example. Did you have similar thoughts like that, or did you maybe take a similar approach when you were thinking about doing this, Marie? I think you're on mute.
Specifically, what was the question about that part? What
It was,
approach?
you said that you, talked about your mailing list with your
Yeah, yeah,
current group, and you say, well,
right.
will I lose this mailing list? And if you did lose it, would it be in favor of maybe a new one? With
Did
a
I think
strategic
about that at
change?
all? Did I think
Yeah,
about that? Yeah, well, I didn't purposely think about it. It kind of, all these things flutter through my mind, they just kind of, ooh, okay, well, there's a positive potential, and there's also this other. So I didn't necessarily try to think about it, but yes, the thoughts come through, and maybe the ones that I do lose are not aligned, right? And that's okay. And that I ultimately will, by making this shift in my direction and strategy, ultimately I will be building a more aligned list that's going to serve me better. But it's not going to happen overnight. And then of course that brings up this other thing. Okay, well, I'm still here and I'm going here, but where am I, right? You're in this other place in between. That in between place is not comfortable. I'll tell you that. And that's where I'm at, and so, and I know, and that's okay. I've been I've worked long enough in my life to know that in between place is a required space that we all, I think, have to go through, but it is not always comfortable.
So,
So
let me ask me a question, Daniel. So what are the reasons? I mean, we all understand strategic thinking is important, and we do it naturally in many different situations, not only at work, right? So my question
correct.
is, why has this become so important? Don't people do it at work? Don't CEOs or leaders do this, or do they do it less at work or in their roles? What happens? Why are we talking about this?
That is an interesting question, and it might shock you how few leaders do this. And to be fair, some of them simply are so pressed for time that they simply don't have the opportunity to do it as much as they'd like. I want to try to be fair to them. But to answer your question, a lot of leaders do not really strategically think because they're constantly putting out fires, constantly trying to maintain what they currently have. And that's why you have companies that don't change for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And when you have consultants or coaches or just employees that start working there, they say, wow, this place is really fractured. There's a lot of problems here. Leadership is disconnected from the front line. Middle management doesn't know what direction to go. How is this place even still staying afloat? Oftentimes, that strategic thinking, where they want to go, how they want to do it, how they're going to align with everybody has not been thought out. And when you say it like that, oh, it's very simple. But when you start talking to the people who make those decisions, that send a shockwave throughout the whole organization. Oftentimes, they're so fixated on one thing, they have tunnel vision. They can't see what's going on around them. And I know that may sound silly, but that's one of the biggest reasons why they need coaches, why they need to work on strategic thinking, and also why we use assessments. Yes, Debbie.
I fully agree with everything, and same planet, we're at same.
I was hoping you would disagree with me. I love your take on things.
No. No, but and I what I struggle with, and I struggle with clients with this problem, is that they think they are thinking strategically, but they're not. And so my question is, how can you help someone think strategically? How can you help someone? How can you guide someone to that place? I mean, as coaches, we ask questions. We're always asking questions. We're always trying to figure out, we're always trying to figure it out. And for example, when Mary was speaking and was talking about her client base, or let's say she's, wanting who she wants to focus on and her target audience. And I was already making the plan, this is, you have to give up something to get something else. And this is where your focus and your value and all this stuff, my marketing mind kicks in. But the thing is that the target audience is just one tiny part of it. Well, not a tiny part, it's a big part, but it's just one part of the strategic thinking. The strategic thinking is way, way more. So without, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I just want to know, how do you get people to think strategically? How can you open up that gate so that they can go beyond their perception of what they think they're doing, you know?
Well,
Maybe,
this is a
maybe
wonderful
I can
question.
just add on to that, and maybe just add on to that, Debbie, is whether it's they have the capacity to do that, or should that be outsourced? Just to finish off there.
I don't know. Can strategic thinking be outsourced? I don't think you can.
To the best of my knowledge, I do not think so, but I stay open-minded to the possibility because there are things I do not know. So to answer the question, that was a wonderful question. And this is really why strategic thinking was my first love, is how do you get them to do this? How do you get them to see their blind spots? How do you get them to stop it, do this instead, is essentially what you're trying to do. One of the hardest ways, and what I mean by that is most hard data-driven ways, most kind of decisive way, is with 360 assessments. So I spoke about, or Gary mentioned to all of you, that psychometric assessments is a big part of this. And the reason they're so popular is because it's really, really hard data. It's hard to, I guess, dissuade the results. It's hard to think, well, this isn't going to work when we have decades of information on assessments, which ones we can use, how to use them. I won't go into that, but I'm just using it as a solution. And for those of you who may not be familiar with a 360 assessment, this is when a leader essentially takes assessment that is designed to measure their leadership capabilities, what they might prefer to do, not to do, get a bit of an evaluation of their leadership style is one way to think about it. And there could be specific areas of that. Now, the real magic happens is that their peers, their direct reports, and their supervisors also take this assessment on their behalf. And this is where you get that validation. If we say, well, Gary's running the BEwell webinar, and you have, let's say, 12 direct reports, and all of them say he's very engaged. He's always talking to us about what we can do here, do there. Sometimes he just needs to let us work, but he really wants to stay on top of things. So you might be teetering on the fact of maybe a micromanage. And then, Gary, if you had a board of directors, they might be saying, Gary pushes a strategic vision very well, but sometimes it gets lost in the strategy and details fall through the cracks. And then you're hearing this from different groups of people. You don't always know who they are, you know who the general group is. But when you have, let's say, 12 people taking this assessment on your behalf, and 9 of them say all the same thing, it's kind of hard to dispute that, especially if they don't know each other. If one's a supervisor, one's a direct report, one's a peer, it's kind of hard to walk away with that because that mirror has been held up right in front of you.
I've never done a psychometric assessment. Never done one of those.
We will have to change that, my friend.
So how do you, because I've done many assessments over the years, personality, whatever. Okay, all these different assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty good at being really there. I don't necessarily see a really solid, consistent leadership style. I've even taken the Tony Robbins assessments and things like that. And so, there's things that pop out, but I don't necessarily see that perfect line, right? I see within me this ability to kind of do. So that's interesting. Tell me about that.
Sure. So
give me some ideas on that.
There is no perfect assessment because there is an assessment for the right person for the right situation. That's why I kind of roll my eyes a little bit when people say, oh, this is the best assessment in the world. I'm just thinking, no, it's not. But you're interested in specific leadership style. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be interesting to me. Yeah, leadership style might be good. Yeah.
Well, it varies kind of like a personality style does. Yeah. Well, if you and I had kind of like a very similar personality, measured personality, we're still going to have various nuances. You're going to have your way of liking to work, with your customers or with your business partners or with your own day-to-day tasks. That's going to be different from the way I do it. And let's say you need to delegate a task. You could also do that very differently from me. So your actual leadership style, you could be more of a servant leader. You could be more of a very engaged, hands-on, kind of like larger than life type of leader. You could be more of an independent style where you take a more hands-off approach. You could also be a very high empathy, supportive leader where you really generously give your time to your staff. That's how you show that you care. But then there's always a downside. Well, maybe not a downside, but there's always a caveat to that. Those real engaged leaders seem great until they're driving you nuts. And you're like, I just, thank you, but I need you to go away so I can do my job now. And then you have those really direct leaders. This is how I started off. It's very direct, very overly direct. It was like a drill sergeant, and I needed to learn how to shave off some of those corners. Your leadership style changes throughout your life. It's never actually the same. Your personality can stay very similar. It rarely changes throughout your lifetime, but it's your behavior that changes. That's where it gets tricky. So I hope I'm giving you somewhat of a solid answer to your question. Let me check in with you real quick.
So let me understand that correctly, Daniel. Just so I'm getting the message that is leadership connected to the situation or to the personality of the person? I mean, is my question, because you say our personality stays the same, right? The value, that kind of stuff.
Over time, your personality rarely changes. There are some changes that can take place, but it's relatively consistent throughout your life. It's behavior and leadership style and preferences that change over time.
Okay. And so the leadership qualities are different according to the situation, right?
Yes. Yes, very much so.
And then that would feed the strategic thinking depending upon the situation, your strategic thinking could potentially shift as well. Is that how I'm understanding it?
That is correct. Yeah, it's like when somebody brings a new detail or something new to your life you didn't know about before. Even something as simple like, hey, have you used this video platform instead of that one? It completely changes the way you might do social media or video media marketing.
So that would make sense. That would make sense about why I say I don't have this particular, I can shift fairly quickly if needed. I don't always want to, but that would explain why if it's all kind of connected, your thinking is going to shift along with your leadership style.
Yeah, and it's also what is expected of you in your current role. As an entrepreneur right now, what you say, what you do, how you do it's going to be different if you were to join corporate America as some type of middle manager or even senior manager of some kind. You're going to be taking on a vastly different type of role. It's not, you're not really calling the shots anymore. You're kind of doing what the company wants you to do. So your leadership style will change. Your personality will still be, you'll still be Marie, but you're still just going to be doing things a lot differently. Debbie, I would love to hear your take on this. Do you have any, I'm hoping you'll have a disagreement with me at some point.
I don't disagree at all. I was just thinking about strategic leadership, okay? And the thing about strategic, for me, strategy, all right? For me, strategy is really based upon you want to go somewhere. So if I want to travel from let's say Munich to Rome, okay, Italy, I can have the strategy of my mission, my vision is I want to go to Rome and I want to see the Vatican or something, right? And the tactic of how I get there is I can either fly, I can drive, I can be driven, that would be the strategy to get there. And the tactic, or let's say the strategy would be, I would be thinking about, okay, I'm going to go with my car. I'm going to have someone who can drive with me. We'll do this in the shortest time possible on the way to get there, because I just want to get there. The strategy is then get to Rome on the fastest way possible. So that could be, if I was looking at it from a business perspective, it would be, I want to be the most innovative coaching company. I want to have the most innovative coaching company in all of Western Europe, for example. Okay, say I want to do that. That's my vision. Okay, and then my mission is to make it make coaching something that is accessible to everybody in the whole wide world, but it's with a seat in Europe. And so then the strategic thinking part of that would be the tactics that I'm going to take to get there. And so the leadership part in that would be, am I going to be an authoritative type of leader? That doesn't jive too well with being a coach. So the strategy, the strategic thinking would have to be, I need to change the way I might be, you know, authoritative type of person, but if thinking strategically, I would say, that ain't going to work. You've got to change the way you're doing this. So, so that means that I would have to actually change my ways or change the way I'm addressing how I work with others to get to where I want to be. So coming back to your question, what do I think about it? I think, you know, with, you have those 360 tests, you know, Marshall Goldsmith has the most famous one that you and I are familiar with, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And you have the authentic leadership model. It's the model of where your values lie and how you're connecting your values to how you're leading and how you're demonstrating those values as a leader. So I think let's say being the owner of a company or being a strategic leader, that's what I would be looking for. I would be looking for, how is somebody else in my company leading? And then I would strategically place them. It's like a chessboard, you know, I would be strategically placing them. This person they really suck at budgeting and they can't do anything with money, and you give them $1 and they spend 2,000, right? No way, right? But they're brilliant with customers. They know how to talk to customers. They know how to get customers excited about what we're doing. They know this and the other. I wouldn't give them the money, you know, I wouldn't give them the financial responsibility, but I would send them out to talk to customers. And that would be a strategic thinking. That would be how I would be doing that with them. And as a leader, that would be the strategic leadership part of that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You did, and you brought up an excellent example. That's, you know, that's personnel management. How do I strategically place everybody in the right position for the greatest possible good? That's a great deal of strategy. You move the chess pieces around. Who's good at what? Who's not so good at what? And how do we maximize this? So, no, excellent example. Gary, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, from a practical situation, what happened to my business, or we had to pivot. We were going in the direction that was not working, and I had a choice to persevere or to pivot. And that was a really difficult decision to make, because persevere is the easy one, because you just keep going, and in the end something will happen, will break, and they will force you to actually make the decision. But I decided to pivot, and that caused a lot of strategic thinking, not sleeping, and having to lay people off, and change business, and change marketing strategy, and so on. So sometimes I think it's easier, like, I mean, to let things just run their course instead of intervening, and, you know. Is that something that you've come across as well, that with leaders actually sometimes don't go into the strategic thinking because it means putting energy and putting effort into doing something rather than just letting it just flow?
That is more common than not, in my experience, because a lot of times you might have these leaders that have been in this position for several years. Sometimes they might be at the end of their career, about to retire. So they're just trying to ride it out. You know, they're not trying to put in that additional effort on the back end. And sometimes, like you just said, it's just easier to keep letting it go, because it may not be sustainable, but it's sustainable at the moment. And they look at the strategic thinking part as this high mountain task that they have to go accomplish. Oh my God, we're going to merge with another company. We're going to acquire something. We're going to be acquired. We're going to change our entire business model. And it's exhausting and overwhelming before they even get started. And that's where the coaching piece comes into play. That's why I can help break this down. And to your point, you know, you try to think of it from a more practical standpoint. This is why folks struggle with strategy a lot of time, because your strategy is not tactical. That's the exact opposite. People feel way more comfortable with some action steps. I need to go do this, this, and this. Instead of, I'm thinking about this, this, and this, these are the implications, which one's the best decision? Because as I'm sure all of you have felt in your life, when you make that decision, that scary decision, and you go all in on it, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, was this the right decision? It's too late now. I decided to go with it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've had some of those thoughts even now. I just sometimes I look back and I think, oh my God, because, you know, I had, like, 10 people working in the office, and now I've got 2 people working in the office. So, and I ask myself sometimes, was it the right decision? But I think you've got to go with your heart, and you've got to go with your intuition. And once you go, you've got to go all in. You can't go halfway, because then that's just worse. I've got a question for Marie. Marie, you said you went from IT into coaching, right?
Yeah, breath work,
You did after, I
mainly
think about
wellness.
20 years or 30 years of IT management, right? And then you,
No, I wasn't in management. I was a coordinator. So I was a lot of testing, a lot of implementing, a lot of supporting the project managers. So I was the kind of the right hand to the project manager, making sure that the tactical side got completed, right? So um, and
my question for you, Marie, was how much strategic thinking went into you leaving that and moving into into the role that you're in now?
I would say probably very little strategic thinking. It was burnout. It was forced. I got to the point where I kept trying to be what I wasn't. and at some point, you get all these signs. I mean, throughout my whole career, I was getting these signs that I needed to do some strategic thinking, but I ignored them because, I
We've
was
all
on
been
this
there.
path. And at some point you can't ignore it. And I got to the point where I can't ignore it anymore. This is not aligned anymore, right? But it had not been aligned it doesn't happen overnight. it was over years. And finally what happened woke me up to the fact that I wasn't aligned. I needed to do some strategic thinking and start being aligned with who I was, not with trying to be what others wanted me to be.
Okay. So is that something, Daniel, that you see? Thank you, Marie, for that answer. That's something that you see with your clients, that people, until they get a burnout or something really major happens, that they start strategic thinking. Is that something you see or not?
It definitely is. And it can sometimes go even deeper than that. They experience that burnout the way Marie has, or they just realize that, you know what, I was just doing this because I felt I had to. We sort of talked about this last week when Rachel was on with the imposter syndrome. And yeah, a lot of people are trying to put themselves in boxes that they don't fit in. And when they start strategically thinking about what they want to do, why they want to do it, what's really interesting and even beautiful about the process is that who someone is and how they actually operate comes out in that strategy planning and that strategic thinking of what they want to do, why they want to do it. You can start to see a little bit more life come back into them because they're thinking about what can we do, what can be, what could possibly happen. When you start to get those thoughts of vitality, this is what could happen. And then sometimes they get off into the weeds, and I let them do this because oftentimes they will answer their question. When they arrive at a point like Marie did, they say, you know what, I really don't want to do this anymore. And a lot of the time they stumble across this when they're going through a strategy session. You can see they're worn out by it. You see they're thinking about the strategy of the company that they may not even want to work for. Or even if they do like it, they don't want to work with the people they have. So they start trying to design, well, how do I do this without this person in the mix or that person in the mix? And it gets very complicated. And honestly, that's why I like it. It gets complicated, it gets messy, and it's really interesting because when you come to sort of the end, and I use that term loosely, the end of it almost never ends. But when they come to their point of no return is what I should say, they have a bit of a aha moment, like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what was the problem. This is where we should go next, or this is what I want to do next. So that's sort of the more humanistic side of it, taking it away from business.
Yeah, it's a scary moment because it's that, you're on the threshold, and what do? You stick or you twist. And that's where it comes along, because you've got your stability, you've got your comfort zone. Even though it's painful, you're willing to stay there. And then to twist and go in another direction really puts you in an unknown territory. So you start moving around and you're having to restart. I mean, yeah, I know, Marie. I can, I would say I can just feel it with the company that nearly, 2024 started this. But the small victories gives you strength, and then slowly. I mean, I give you just an example. Like when we were coming to nearly a close down, the company was coming to a close down in 2023, and I was looking for some sort of energy because the whole team was coming down. I was coming down, and I had this idea of actually teaching language or teaching English, but not through lessons or courses, but through events. And it was just an idea, it was just an acorn, and I just said, well, I just put it there, and nothing happened. But it was just there to be developed. It was just a thought, and it became a reality. It became a reality where I started the first event. That was in March, where we had 25 people turned up, and wow, it went from just a thought to a little idea to a reality with a lot of work. And that gave the whole team energy, and it was like, whoa, something can happen. It's not going to become our core business. It's not going to change, But anyway, just to say that we were able to do it. So little sort of battles, little victories like that help you become stronger and give you confidence, and says you can do it. So
That's absolutely right. That's a great example. Yeah. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. I wanted to share with all of you a bit of a case study I have.
Yeah.
This is a former client of mine. I won't say her name, but this is when I was working for Boston Consulting Group, and I was the on-staff executive coach for the Boston and Chicago office. And I would get all different types of people, different types of personnel, all walks of life, and that was an amazing part of the job. This specific coachee stands out to me because she really went through the ringer of one of the most difficult changes that someone who is in management that ascends to leadership, one of the hardest things to do. And she originally came to me because she was having trouble getting her direct reports to buy into the tasks that she was giving them. Now you might say, okay, well, if she's your boss, you have to do what she says. And in the corporate world, sure, that is the case, but that doesn't mean they have to do it well. They don't really have to be respectful of you. They can do all these other things. And she just was like, how do I get my employees to listen to me? How do I get them, bought into the process, into the strategy? And when I worked with her on this, we rarely talked about what the process was of her job. It was more about how is she approaching them? How do you strategically approach and think about your staff? What are they good at? Debbie brought this up earlier. Put this person who's good with customers over here, finance over here. She never did that before. She never had that type of experience, and she never essentially had the leash taken off of her. She was always in middle management. There was always somebody that she had to check in with. And when she was ascending to this more senior director type role, there was a lot less people for her to check in with. So Gary, kind of like the experience you spoke to, where I made this decision, I just jumped right in. She was sort of thrown in, but she did agree to it. So we started off by understanding what exactly is the problem. My employees don't get things done the way I want them to. Okay, can you tell me more about that? And she started talking about all these tactical details that she used to work with. She couldn't move beyond this. They won't send the emails this way. They won't, file the paperwork this way. They won't work with the customer this way. I say, how much of a detriment is that to the actual role? And that stumped her. She said, well, it's just not how I would do it. I said, well, that's not your role. What is your role now? And that stopped her in the tracks again. She says, well, to oversee this. I said, okay, how are you overseeing it right now? She said, I'm overseeing the tasks. She wasn't overseeing the strategy. She didn't want to let go of how they did things. She wouldn't let go of her previous role, her old things that she was comfortable with. It was just easier to hold on to that than to move on to the higher level strategy. Are we doing this, this, and this? Okay, are we getting the customers taken care of? Are we getting all the work done? She had to ascend at a high level and let go of somewhat of her micromanaging ways. She didn't know she was a micromanager. She had to face that head on when she could no longer focus on those things. And while that was her old job, being very tactical, holding on to that details, she had to appoint someone else to take over the role that she was in. Even more of a challenge for her. So before I go into any more detail, have either of you dealt with this in your life? Or Debbie, I know you're coaching, Marie, you're in coaching. Have you come across people in these situations?
I can say that I can speak from my time in IT where I was aware of enough of what I could and couldn't do, right? And so, and especially towards the end, when I finally it's time to go, I was even more aware of what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. And I experienced a leader that I would say, I will do this, will do anything here. There's just this one area I'm not willing to go there. I just, that isn't my best area. I know that that's going to be, not as productive. And so, but that person did not like the fact that I wasn't willing to go there. I was willing to go everywhere else, do anything else. And so I experienced from that perspective, the micromanager who is, that really was the catalyst to throw me out completely. That was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. If they can't hear me when I tell them I'm really good here, I'm really good here, I'm really good here, and you then want to put me here where I know that I'm going to have that I decided that was it. So I've experienced from that angle. And then I also, with some of the people that I work with, I have experienced where they're going through that as well with some of their people. So from a different perspective. And so really boundaries come into play there, being able to be aware. For me, having that awareness of your own boundaries and how you can gently express them to somebody else. And that's a learning as well. Gently, you have the boundary, but how can you gently? I tried to be gentle with this guy, but at some point I wasn't. It was like, I'm done, right? So it's like having the boundaries yourself as the leader, but also as the person receiving the leadership.
You had to rip that Band-Aid off.
I did.
I think it's being assertive, right? It's just trying to be a little bit assertive. I bet it's one of those things that you have to lay down from an early point, really, not right at the end, because then it becomes aggressive rather than assertive, because that's the way it's seen if you haven't put those lines down. Debbie, you had your hand up. You got an insight or a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, Daniel asked if anyone has experienced it, and I could have been his client back then. I went through that situation. I was promoted out of the ranks. I was very young back then. I was, like 28, 29 years old, and I was promoted out of the ranks to lead a team. And before I had done that, I was a team leader, but I was hired as the team leader. So it was a totally different situation coming in, when we hired new people that was clear to them, Debbie says what's going to happen and what's going on. But in the other one, I was a member of the team and I got promoted out of the team, and the team was aggressive towards me. And I was hoping everything would be happy, hunky-dory. We're all still friends and we get to do everything like we've done. And I'm just the one who's going to get beat up by senior management when something goes wrong, type of thing. And it just, just as an example, I walked in one morning and saw one of my team members in the kitchen making tea, and I said, "Good morning." And she came at me like this, "What is good about this morning?" And I was like, whoa,
Oh, wow.
Whoa. But yeah. And since then I've actually enjoyed watching how others manage this, It's fascinating to see how others get through this. It's I liked your story because I liked how you asked those questions to get her to think differently. And then that is strategic thinking, you know, because she had to shift from thinking as not only tactical, but as I want it done it my way, right? Instead of what am I here for anyway, you know? That question, to answer that question, what am I here for anyway? What is it good for? I mean, if I were taking, let's say, Gary and I chat quite often. And when he talks about his school, and I'm thinking to myself, where you want to go with this, Gary? Where do you want to take this school? You know, he's got an incredible opportunity because he's doing stuff live in person in real life people, but he's competing against online things, you know, the online schools, the online language courses and stuff you can do, or even the fact that, you know, you put it in English and it'll turn up in Japanese if you need it, right? So in Google. So there's where, you know, strategic thinking for this particular business would be where do I want to be in regards, you know, in this whole landscape of this business, you know, of this what's the word I'm looking for?
Puzzle.
Well, yeah, but it's this whole, you know, it's the whole market. Where do I want to be in this market? And that's where the strategic thinking would come in. And so I think that's really quite I love the stories. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going off tangent.
Oh, stop, Debbie, stop. No, I think strategic thinking is like, it's not only at work. I was just reflecting what Debbie is saying. You know, we get absorbed. We might think it's just in our profession, our work, but it's in our life, in our relationships, in our love, or, you know, caring, and all those kind of things. We have strategic thinking. It's understanding how much energy and how much we want to put into which area of all of that. You know, maybe at the moment, Deb is putting a lot of strategic thinking into her gardening. I'm sure she is in this moment there. And it's because in this period, I know she's doing a lot of work on her garden. And I'm sure there's a lot of thought that goes behind that. More probably in her gardening than in the business at this moment, definitely. So I don't know, is that something that you come across as well, Daniel, with your clients, that they are maybe more strategically thinking at something else? Maybe they, you know, at home, maybe the daughters had a child, or the CEO's daughters had a child, and maybe there's more thought around that rather than at work. Is that something that's come across?
Oh yeah, you know, family life, you know, other things are going on, relatives in town, whatever stressful event, you know, that could be happening. You know, they're being stretched very thin. You know, they're strategically thinking about what's going on in their life outside of work. And, you know, that's a good thing. You know, we can't just be work all the time. So whenever they do open up and talk about that, I always encourage them to do that. Because sometimes it's like when you listen to somebody vent, once they do that, they're a lot more likely to kind of be able to work through whatever the problem actually is. So many times they're like, oh my God, my in-laws are in town, so-and-so is getting married, this and that is happening. My child is going to high school, secondary school, primary school, or, you know, whatever phase of life that they're in. So yeah, they have to strategically think about that all the time. And parenting, that's another one. Strategically thinking with, okay, what am I going to do with my children? Each of them, if you have more than one, poses very different types of threats or very different types of opportunities, or just paths they're going to go on in life, as they all are different. And
Yeah,
I will tell you that the story I told you about this coachee, it took about 2 months to get her to break that cycle. And she started to really think, because it was the first time in her career she ever saw where her work came from. And she was actually seeing, okay, well, we have this strategy that comes through. That's why we were doing this work. When she got exposed to that, she could start to actually coach and mentor her own direct reports and get away from maybe how they do something that she wouldn't do, to more about actually achieving the goal. So I wanted to give you some closure to that little story I told. She ended up doing very well, ended up getting herself promoted again within 1 year. So she was quite the rock star. It was great to work with her.
yeah. Okay, well, listen, we're coming to the end. We're coming to the end. Let's just, Marie, what have you got on your, what are you working on in this period? A quick 1 minute. Are you
What am I working on as far as strategic thinking?
Yeah. No. What are you working on? As in, what are you following in this period? Are you working on some particular project, writing a book, podcast, specific
Okay.
clients?
Well, I think, I made that recent shift in my target audience.
Yeah.
So I think I'm really working on strategically finding the appropriate strategies and tactics to now get those people to see me and be more visible, I think, in that area. So getting more of those women in midlife who are, I haven't figured out how to get them before they hit burnout. So I haven't figured out that. I have in my mind, how can I get to them before they burn out? I haven't figured that part out yet, but it's out there, kind of like that thing you said, you have it out there. How do I get to them before they burn out? But I do know that once they burn out, I can help them. So that's where I'm at.
Prevention. Oh, good. Debbie, what about you? What are you working on? Leave the gardening to one side.
Actually, no, it's not. It's the gardening. I can leave it to one side. We're building a greenhouse conservatory type of thing in the backyard. And the reason I'm doing that, though, is I think strategic. It's because I was getting bogged down in my mind. And I was, and I don't know if if you have this feeling, if anybody else has this feeling, but I sometimes have this feeling I have a huge head on a tiny body. It's like all of this stuff is going on in my mind, and it's going and going, and it keeps running around, and it doesn't even, it's like I can't find an end to it. It's like a washing machine. And I have to do something physical to get rid of that, to balance it out. And actually, it happened by chance through one of these meetings, these BEwell meetings, where I was speaking about ikigai and gardening, and that that gardening is what has helped, these people in Japan, and this island on Japan, to get as old as they are and stay as healthy as they are. And I have a huge garden, so why not do it, right? So that the strategic thinking part was not so much about having a greenhouse or whatever it is, but it was about how can I do something to balance my life? And how can I do something to get out of my head and into my, into being a holistic type of thing, and so that I could show up as not being just head centered, but rather as, complete. So it is a part. So the gardening is a part. The gardening is not the garden. It's not about getting roses growing or whatever it is, right? That's not it. It's the part is it's different. And it's helping me to think clearer, because now I'm getting more focused while I'm out there doing, screwing together, boards and stuff like that. I have ideas for content management, and I have ideas for how to support others that need, help with their strategic positioning, because that's my work. That's what I did 25 years. And I've reached out somehow, serendipity happens, people come, and I get into conversations, and just 2 weeks ago, I had someone here who was talking about something like similar to this. And it's, I think it's important. Yeah. So sorry, I'm going off again.
Yeah, well, Mohini is in a leadership role as well. She's not, we can't see her on screen, but she wrote in the chat that, let me read what she wrote. She said, I've just stepped into a leadership role, so lots of things to learn. I'm finding these discussions really helpful. So, as we're coming to the end, Debbie?
Here's the question. You say she wrote in the chat. I can't see anything from in the chat. Nothing.
I put Daniel's contacts in the chat as well.
Can't see it.
Can everyone else see it?
I can see where you put my information. I cannot see Mahini's message.
Can you see Stephen Busher, who said I need to go? No?
I can see that, yeah, but
Yes, yeah, I can see that.
And then there was Mohini. Maybe she sent the message directly to me and not to everyone.
Very
I
possible,
can't
yeah.
see, I can't see Daniel's connections, contact stuff.
No, I put that to everyone.
No.
Let me do that again. I'll copy it and put it back in again. But I did put it at the beginning.
It might just be, I don't know, maybe something's wrong with my,
Copy. Let me put that back straight away.
So Gary, while you'll do that, I will say closing out with strategic thinking. You know, even though I coach on strategic thinking, I use it all the time myself as well. And since I relocated here in the States to Dallas, Texas, I was in Boston, Massachusetts. Those are very different areas of the United States. And I'm basically regrowing my business here, getting more of a local presence. And we're all global now anyway. But growing a local presence is also a really important piece. So that's where my strategic thinking is going into right now. How do I get myself some exposure here? Where to target, you know, where are some of the companies I can target? Where's Chamber of Commerce, where maybe I can give some talks similar to the BEwell webinar, see what I can do there. But that's where a lot of my strategy planning and strategic thinking is going into right now. So I can continue to build max potential coaching into maybe just a bit bigger than where it is right now and see where I can go with it. But I've always enjoyed the work. And Gary, thank you so much for having me on. Do you have something else in closing?
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you to you, Daniel. This BEwell started off just as a conversation, as you know, 55 weeks ago. 55 is that
Wow.
it's a long, and I'm really amazed, and I'm the generosity of all the people. I keep saying that, really, and I've got like speakers and co-hosts booked now until the middle of October. That's incredible as well for me. I can't, you know, but people are contacting me and they want to come on, and it's really humbling as well to see people actually trying to help each other. Next week we've got Rika Kozi coming along. I invited her. She's a climate change expert specialist. She knows much more than I do, definitely, but I want to know what's happening, what she's doing different to me, what is happening in different parts of the world, how important is this? Is this really as serious as people are making out? Yes, I want to know all of this information. So I've invited her. So next week, if you want to come along, you're free. Please do come along. We're going to be talking about climate change, what we can do, what's being done, and so on. So do come along if you're free.
Absolutely.
That's about it, really. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Daniel, for your time, Debbie, Marie, and Mohini. And hopefully I'll see you guys next week, Tuesday, 5 to 6 p.m. CET.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Daniel. Good to see you, Marie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Look
Pleasure.
after-
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.